It is 9:21 p.m. Um, on what day is it today? 1st of May, 2024. Stressing about thesis. It's gonna be pretty shit probably. Oh well. But today I want to talk about something that's been, well, there's a lot of existential philosophical, maybe like a philosophical crisis of kind of going through right now. Because a lot of my foundation was on empirical evidence, but then that logic behind that, it's also, based on a leap of faith. And I think I've just come to the conclusion that I don't know anything, and it's difficult to think of anything. Think of a rule. My one philosophy is I've reached a point where I reached a conclusion to one philosophy, and I could kind of circle it around, and then, start something new. And I can always come back to this philosophy as like one new philosophy. Or the other option, which could also be part of the option I just talked about, is that maybe absurdism actually makes sense. Because at the end of the day, absurdism is about the incapability for us to reach true meaning, right? So it's like, fuck it. Who cares? Just, have fun, but not in a purely hedonistic way. Just more like an intrinsic Buddhist sort of, appreciation for life. Maybe, possibly. I'll come back to that again later. But I think I have to just leave existential philosophies, or like, well, existential, but also the philosophy of reality, a little to the side for now. I don't know what the fuck I should do with it. But on a more cultural level, one thing that's been bothering me, I think I talked about it before as well, is the cultural shock culture. And a lot of it I thought was due to capitalism. I mean, it's, I think, due to capitalism, but the positive things that came out of capitalism, like basically better accessibility, less gatekeeping, and availability of choices and options. A lot of that, I think, is thanks to capitalism. But that sort of good thing has created a new, more negative thing, which is oversaturation, right? Oversaturation that leads to, that could be in the form of art, right? That's part of how shock culture exists. Hearst, the shark in formaldehyde, or the skull with covered in diamonds. There's definitely an element of like shock and trying to appeal to that shock. Or even I guess Banksy's like the paint, their art going, like, getting shredded. That sort of also has a level of shock, even though maybe it's founded more on their criticism of the art business. And it's not just art, right? The whole idea of clickbait and the the thumbnail industry of YouTube, it's all about getting your attention. It's the shock culture. And if you get the attention, you win. And I guess the more negative part of capitalism, the mass constant advertisement, all that is also closely related to shock culture because of so much, saturation. Like, there's no time for an individual to go in depth for each one. There's just too many. So the one that gets the attention, or not just going in depth, but going through everything is impossible. So the one that gets the attention kind of wins. And and also because of how our memory works, shock is a very useful tool that causes us to remember even after possibly decades. Like, for example, the dairy commercial of the gorilla. I saw it as an example of an ad in like year 4, and I still remember it. Shock. But the reason why I'm so obsessed with shock right now is that it lacks depth. I think it's cheap. And I feel it's a bit exploitative. Because shock includes also lying, right? People can lie, but if you click on it, if you pay attention to it, they win. And you were lied to. And you sacrifice your time, even if it's for a few seconds, for that lie. And for some reason, shock has been valorized in the art discourse as well. Even when maybe there isn't much layer behind it, like Hearst's formaldehyde skull. The thing is, like, I don't know too much about those artworks. I haven't really read much. I haven't really critically observed too much. But one thing is that it's about death, right? And maybe it's also an argument, a paradoxical argument about the immorality of like morality within within art. Could be, but it just, I feel like there's way too much shock, or at least the shock gets valued more than if there is a layer underneath it. And it's superficial thing that's being valued so much just because of how effective the technicality of it is. Like, it's not beauty, right? Beauty has this like intuitive, powerful, almost immoral aspect to it, one would say. I mean, I don't fully agree with that either, but it's really hard to describe, but like beauty or love, that some sort of like, fuck. I have some arguments, but it's gonna be a long argument. My point is, shock is being valorized too much for something that, it isn't. Or an item gets valued when the truth is it's mostly valued because of its shock factor. And, I think it's also really hard to explain right now because of my philosophical crisis, but the point is, The point is, shock is unethical to an extent, or it is, I think. There's, it's like using you. It's using. My hair looks weird. It, it's using you, you know? But then I was thinking, okay, um, the issue is I do live in a world of oversaturation. And if I want to go into the arts, I have to use shock. I have to utilize shock. I don't think there's much way to survive. Um, but then I was thinking, what could be. Well, I wasn't thinking, but then I just came across something that I thought, maybe this is a more moral manifestation of shock. And that moral manifestation of shock is absurdity. Because, and first of all, what do I mean by absurdity? Or obscurity could also be a better, obscurity might be a better term. Or absurd. I think they kind of come hand in hand. It's to do with a shock that comes from you're not really sure what you're looking at, and it kind of incites curiosity, maybe even a little bit of fear because it's something unknown, or it creates a weird sense of anticipation that never comes. That could be part of absurdity. Um, and I'm kind of alluding to the aesthetic of like liminal spaces or like VCR edits. There's something. It has this similar, or even like lost media, that sort of aesthetic, or conspiracies, UFOs. It's the obscure. It does utilize a similar mechanism as a shock, I think. It pulls your attention in because of its innate nature. But the reason why I call it a moral shock factor, or moral shock, or moral manifestation of the shock culture is because it grabs your attention, but it incites curiosity and a sense of creativity. And the other is that it makes you uncomfortable, right? And I think in any form of expression, art, uncomfortableness is a very valuable thing, because what it does is it's subverting norms, it's subverting expectation, status quo. It breaks you away from basically power, because that's what status quo norms are. And it could create a chance to like a reflection or inspiration, sort of, to expand your creativity or to break away from your normative thoughts. I think that's at least what feeling uncomfortable can do. It doesn't mean it will do. I think there's an element of being aware of that as well, so that you can recognize something making you uncomfortable, and then analyze from there, like, why is it making me uncomfortable? It is one of the important aspects of performance art, like contemporary performance art. Um, of course, and that in that sense, I would say there's more layers to it. There's more elements that allow you to critique, right? Thanks to the uncomfortableness it incites. And one thing is that well, this is a bit of a weird contradiction, but there needs to be a layer of creativity from the one that produces that obscurity, absurdity, right? You need to be able to touch that weird sense that might be a little difficult because you're trying to stray away from the norms. Um, and but the thing is, and then the whole point is that if there's too much of a similar aesthetic of obscurity, absurdity, that doesn't become as obscure, absurd anymore, right? Because that's sort of the new norm. It's similar to how avant-garde movements work. At a certain point, these avant-garde that was like middle fingering the predecessors becomes the norm. So that movement has to be middle fingered again by the next art movement. In that sense, something cannot stay obscure for too long because it's not absurd obscure anymore. It's like something you just see. Like even the whole aesthetic of liminal spaces, to an extent, has become less obscure absurd because of how much it's present on the internet, and also the VHS aesthetics, to be honest. I gave them an example, but yeah. But then at the same time, people do still utilize liminal spaces and VHS aesthetics to incite this different sort of shock. So then, but then it kind of still works. So that's where maybe it's less. It kind of spoils the morality I saw in absurdity, obscurity. It it sort of like commercializes it again, and it's like gets replicated so much over and over again. But it kind of still works. So it becomes superficial, but it still provides that shock. So in a sense, it can draw back to the immorality. So it's a difficult, it's a bit difficult to think. But then at the same time, the shock comes from the recognition of absurdity, obscurity, for the most part, I think. So it still does incite that uncomfortableness, the critical element. So it's like it's weird, but I'm trying to figure out a way around the immorality of shock culture, and to me that has been the only thing so far, other than the fact that I should just accept the shock culture because I live in it. I need to use it as well. But yeah, another thing is I see a lot is playing around with it's like breaking the fourth wall of YouTube, which is playing around with the thumbnail or the UI of the like while you're scrolling through the thumbnails. I forgot what it's called. Before clicking onto any video, and this is done through the profile icons of the channel, or even the name of the channel. And a really common one is having no title in the video. That adds a lot of layer to the obscurity and absurdity to the already obscure, absurd thumbnail they might have. It is a little too common, so it does ruin that obscurity a bit, but it does help question the value of or the norm of having titles like this framing device in a setting such as YouTube. I think it does question. At least it incites a bit of critique around it. How that sort of framing device can be used, and how that affects your choice to view it. Because a lot of people tend to rely more on the thumbnail, maybe. Or I guess maybe titles as important. It's hard to say. And the lack of it, I think the aesthetic, the blank space next to the circular icon, it is weird. And that's just another observation. Another one I've seen is like the thumbnail coming out and touching it looks like it's coming out of the box of the thumbnail and touching the areas that would have the title of the video or something. So it plays around with the norms of YouTube thumbnails, and I think that's interesting. It's I would say less immoral, or a more manifestation of short culture. That's it. Short video, 20 minutes, done. I've also been watching Adventure Time. It's pretty cool.